Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where, after taking a break for the Oscars, the comic book movie news cycle has started up again in earnest. Yes, not only do we have 3 comic book movie news stories to discuss today, but even a viewer question. Yes, when it rains, it pours. And the first story of the day actually has to do with the really good buzz around Suicide Squad. This is a movie that is shadowing Batman v Superman. And while Batman v Superman finds itself like in a maelstrom of mixed signals and conflicting reports as to whether or not it's a good movie, Suicide Squad continues to be in a good place. And let's hope Warner Brothers can keep it that way, because I still believe that all of the problems that Batman v Superman is having were really brought on by the picture itself, and that they gave some of the people who are perhaps against DC challenging Marvel ammunition, right? Because you can recall that before that Doomsday trailer, everything was fine. So anyway, we're talking about Suicide Squad 2 today, and the film that might get in the way of its sequel, but yet also benefit Warner Brothers, so I think it's still okay, Bright. But first, let's talk about Suicide Squad 2. This story came about because a reporter for Variety took to Twitter to talk about how he had heard through the grapevine from his sources that Warner Brothers is so happy with Suicide Squad that, just like with Deadpool, they're really trying to push a sequel. And they want it to go into production in 2017, conceivably to be released in 2018. But there's a little bit of a problem, and that David Ayer and Will Smith, it's interesting that Will Smith, you have to really respect him as a business person, because there are a lot of really talented actors in that cast for Suicide Squad, also people who are very much in demand and get a lot of buzz, but it's Will Smith that seems to have locked down David Ayer for another project, for a follow-up. And so, that means on set he was angling to lock Ayer up for the next round, which is impressive. But anyway, although Smith, for all his business smarts, certainly is in a little bit of a difficult position with his career right now. But, maybe playing Deadshot will turn things around. But anyway, there's a film that they want to make together that might delay Suicide Squad 2, because it's an ambitious film. It's called Bright, and it's from Max Landis. Now, I have mixed feelings about Max Landis. I think he has interesting things to say. He had a really infamous discussion with fans about whether or not Rey was a Mary Sue. I thought he made some excellent points. He's not particularly censored, and sometimes he makes mistakes, but I think he comes from a good place, basically, is how I would describe Max Landis. Now, he's written Chronicle and American Ultra, which, American Ultra, as you might recall if you saw my review, I didn't say that it was something that I would see in theaters necessarily, but I thought it was worth watching, and they had some really excellent aspects to it. So, but then of course he also wrote Victor Frankenstein, which was just absolutely awful. James McAvoy's enthusiasm being one of the only things that could save that picture. So anyway, Max Landis has a new script called Bright that David Ayer has, rewritten in his own style. And Max Landis put out a fun tweet about that, saying, today's actually a big tweet day. I have another tweet coming up that we're going to discuss. But Max Landis tweeted that it was fun to see his script morph before his eyes to become very Ayer-esque. So David Ayer rewrote the script, and so this was a very funny description of it. They said, it's like End of Watch, that's the Jake Gyllenhaal, Michael Pena movie, that was actually pretty good, and opened at #1 when it opened. It was one of Jake Gyllenhaal's rare successes at the box office, and it was a solid movie, but it was very David Ayer, right? It was 2 police officers in LA dealing with gang violence and, a night that goes wrong, one of those things. Like David Ayer's specialty before he started to try and up his game with First Fury, big World War II movie, and now Suicide Squad. Although I do feel that with Suicide Squad, well, at least from the trailers, it seems that he finally has upped his game. I'm very impressed with what we saw in that first official trailer. But anyway, it's End of Watch, but then they twist it and they say, but with orcs and fairies. I'm like, what? And not in present day. And so it's going to be humans dealing with orcs and fairies, I guess, orcs and fairies in a gang, and having to, humans having to fight them perhaps. And Will Smith would star, and Joel Edgerton is also in talks to join that movie. Joel Edgerton, almost taken down by the Exodus whitewashing controversy, but I think really brought himself back strong with The Gift, which was really beloved by a lot of people, not only for his work in it, but the fact that he wrote and directed it. But anyway, I think Bright sounds like a very good picture, although I don't know if it's smart to delay Suicide Squad 2. Let's see how strong it is. If I were Warner Brothers, I'd be like, I'm glad you want to make Bright, but Suicide Squad is such a big deal. Please make that movie first, because Bright sounds like a big commitment, especially when you have to factor in a very lengthy post-production and even a pre-production with so much world building to figure out. But we'll see. I would also be concerned that it's maybe too similar to Suicide Squad. Like, you can see a fairy being very Harley Quinn-like, and I'd be like, just focus on Suicide Squad. That's your new home, David Ayer. I would chain him to it with a big paycheck and say, go to work. But I'm curious, what do you think? What would you do if you were in Warner Brothers' position? Would you let David Ayer do what he wants and move forward with Bright, even if it delayed Suicide Squad 2? Or would you make Suicide Squad a top priority and you would pay out the money necessary to make sure that happened? I'm very happy to hear that they're so excited, although let's keep in mind that often they will say that they're going to make a sequel to something before a movie comes out to try and make it seem more like, you can't stop this train, so you might as well get on, right? So it could just be for publicity. But sometimes it's genuine, and also sometimes it's genuine, but then they have to scrap those plans because the movie doesn't do well enough at the box office. So, like, for instance, I feel like George Miller very much intended to make a Mad Max Fury Road sequel, but and that's why he announced it and told so many people about it, but Warner Brothers, of course, has yet to greenlight it. So anyway, that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day comes from a tweet, a fun exchange I had from BTT viewer Mess520 yesterday, and I had so much fun with it, I decided to make it a story on the show. So Mess520 said, so this is talking about a semi-spoiler that I discussed yesterday. So if you don't want to see a spoiler at all for the DC Cinematic Universe, you can skip to the next story. So I'll give you a moment to do that. The links are either the annotations, or they're always definitely in the video description with time code. So I'll give you just a moment there if you want to jump ahead. Still here? All right, so Mess520 said, so if there's no Green Lantern until 2019, that was revealed yesterday at Entertainment Weekly, the Green Lantern will not show up until the earliest with Justice League Part 2. Does that mean that the Justice League will only have 6 members, and then hashtag Unite the 7? Because you might recall that the poster, the first reveal for Aquaman, had Unite the 7 written over him. Now that could refer to Unite the 7 Seas, which could be Aquaman's mandate to himself, or perhaps that he's been given. But then a lot of people felt it was for the Justice League. Now in the official photo that they released with that CW special, there were only 6 members. So perhaps it is just 6 members in the Justice League, and the Unite the 7 does refer to the 7 Seas. But my response to Mess520 was, maybe Mara's the 7th? Barf. Now, I like Mara in the comics quite a bit, but I have a real problem with Amber Heard. Maybe personally she's a wonderful person. Johnny Depp sure seems to like her. But I just feel that Amber Heard is a real B movie actress, and that is being kind. I would actually say she's probably a C movie actress. And she seems like somebody that Zack Snyder would put in one of his secondary films, and by that I mean something he's producing and not directing himself personally. I just don't think she's up to the caliber of the rest of the cast. And I also think that she brings Gal Gadot down, and I really want to see Gal Gadot rise to the occasion. We don't need another Malin Ackerman situation, right? You want actresses who are as strong as your male leads. So I think that Amber Heard, she's just too much in the eye candy category. I think there are so many other people who would be better suited for the role. I would even rather go with a new Discovery and Unknown than bring Amber Heard on board. I feel Amber Heard's always just there because she's, just willing to be eye candy and, do that kind of old Zack Snyder bad habits. So I'm just curious what you think is the situation. Do you think that it is just 6 Justice Leaguers and the Unite the 7 was for the 7 Seas? And how would you feel if it was Mara? I saw some people who saw this tweet and they said, I would like another Justice Leaguer to be a woman. And I think that's not a bad idea, but I would prefer it to be another female DC character. It's tough. You could always do like, Black Canary sometimes is on the Justice League. I would, take, a Hawk Girl who, people just basically look at the animated series. But then, of course, they're using those, the Hawk Girl character and Black Canary on the CW TV shows. Although that's not stopping them from using the Flash. So those would be characters I'd be more interested in. Maybe even Vixen would be cool. I would like to see her perhaps. There are lots of different ways that you could go. So I'm curious, who do you want to see to be the 7th member, or do you think they're just going to stick with those 6? I think that if I had to guess, it would be the 6 based on that image they released for the CW special. All right, so the third story of the day. This came out of Bob Iger talking, answering an investor question. And they said, do you think you're going to make any R-rated Marvel movies? And Bob Iger said, nope, there are no plans for any R-rated Marvel movies. And the response to this very quickly was, never say never, Bob. I think you're going to change your mind considering how much money that Deadpool is making. And I would say that Bob Iger is not going to change his mind because, Warner Brothers I could see potentially making an R-rated film, but Bob Iger and Disney are in a very unique position, and that's because they're such a family-oriented company. And all of their big movie characters need to play into their theme parks and into their merchandise. The Disney store, they have their own stores, that are across the world. And I just think that an R-rated Marvel movie, we talked about this saying, a franchise has to be accessible across the board to the same audience. You can't really change those things. And if they want to take the X-Men movies over at Fox and make them all R, they could potentially do that. But I think also they've had a lot of problems over at Fox with their Marvel movies, so they're willing to be experimental. But Disney's not having any problems. And I think that they're going to want to make sure, Disney doesn't really put out R-rated movies, period. And I think that that's just like a company policy and because of the Disney brand. And they are very different than all the other studios. And that their name, Walt Disney, they took the Walt out a while ago. But that still stands for something. And I think there are a lot of people who would not want to see that, the Disney brand go in that direction. And I would agree with that. I think that Disney's fine. Disney doesn't need to go R-rated, and there are other studios that can. I would also like to point out, though, that Disney does go R-rated with their Marvel properties on Netflix, and they found a very good solution to that problem, which is working out great for all of us. We love the Marvel Netflix shows. And because they're able to be R-rated, it really, takes them in a different direction and makes them very distinct, from what they're doing on the big screen. And so I think that's worked really successfully, and I would like to see that continue. So there's no plans for an R-rated Marvel movie, but they're already making R-rated Marvel TV shows on Netflix. And someone said, well, what about Blade and Ghost Rider and those rights that they have back? I would think those characters will all go to Netflix. You see the Punisher there already. So I would expect that to continue. And basically, they've just taken the Marvel Knights imprint and put it on Netflix, which I think is very smart. So I think that Disney, their game plan is fantastic. They have no problems. Maybe if they someday run into problems, then they can reconsider. But I think I just would not expect it whatsoever. And I think that Bob Iger maybe should have explained himself a little bit better. But at the same time, the fan community has gotten quite contentious lately, as you can see from the reaction to the Ghostbusters trailer. And I think Bob just I'm on a first name basis with Bob Iger. Sorry, I'll be more respectful. I think Iger just wants to shut it down and just is like, I don't want to talk about it. We're not going to make any. I think he should have directed people to the Netflix properties, but I think that the Disney name isn't very prominently displayed with there. It's very much you always just hear Marvel Netflix, and so maybe he just wants to keep the Disney brand out of that so it can continue to be very successful. All right, so that's the third story of the day. Now, the viewer question comes from a new but frequent BTT commenter who I love, Queen and Sheena. And Queen and Sheena says, question, Grace. Do you think that Gambit was removed from Fox's release schedule because of the fizzling of hype for X-Men Apocalypse? At first, Fox and Channing were so gung-ho to make this movie, and then suddenly, poof, it's gone. Your thoughts, Grace, and do you think that Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique controversy played a role? Lots of emojis. That's a great question, and I had a lot of requests to talk about the Gambit release date change. So what happened? Well, they took Gambit off the schedule. It lost its release date, and they put two mystery projects up on the board instead. One, I think we all believe, is Deadpool 2, set for January, President's Martin Luther King weekend 2018, because Valentine's Day weekend that year is taken up by the third 50 Shades of Grey movie. But anyway, I think that there's another X-Men movie dated that could potentially be Gambit. But here's what I think happened. I don't think that Gambit's gone. I think it just didn't make its release date because they lost their director, Rupert Wyatt. And I think that that ended up working very much in the favor of the project because Doug Liman signed on. And Doug Liman is a wonderful choice for this property. He's had some misfires, but let's not forget that he did The Bourne Identity, the very first one, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and of course, Edge of Tomorrow, which was fantastic. So I think he's a wonderful get, and much better actually than Rupert Wyatt. And I think the Gambit movie really lucked out, and so did Channing Tatum, getting Doug Liman to take on that film. And filming is still, by the way, set to begin March 2016, this month, so we'll know very soon, actually, if it's going to happen. Boy, time moves fast. The Gambit movie is still expected to go forward, and I think they just maybe are going to see how it turns out. I still think it's going to happen, though, because I think that Deadpool was so successful that actually that will strengthen Channing Tatum's resolve to be Gambit, because I think Channing Tatum is just as well cast as Gambit as Ryan Reynolds is as Deadpool. Now, Channing Tatum, we'll see. I think he's had a little bit of misfires. Hail Caesar didn't work out so well for him. Hateful Eight, he was very good in, but that was like a very small thing for him. But Magic Mike XXL did not do particularly well. So I think he's in a little bit of a gray area in terms of he's not a slam dunk at the box office right now, which would of course make anyone very nervous, himself and the studio. But I think that Fox is definitely going to move ahead with Gambit. I think it would be a mistake not to. I think it's a good project, and I think it's coming together very, very well. Léa Seydoux cast as Belladonna. Great casting there also, by the way. And I think they might want to let the X-Men movies breathe. I do think X-Men Apocalypse is in trouble, but it's lucky that it's coming out against Alice Through the Looking Glass, which I also think is having some problems. I think that could be a potentially weak movie-going weekend, which is weird because it's Memorial Day weekend, and that's huge. That should be a huge movie-going weekend, but I think people have their reservations substantially about both those films and might be saving their money to go and see other blockbusters because it's going to be an expensive summer. So I think that I wouldn't say that Gambit is gone. I just think it's, they're being very careful with it, which I think is smart, and I think they should move forward with it, and we will see if it does indeed begin shooting this month. But, again, I think Deadpool should encourage and embolden Channing Tatum rather than make him nervous. I'm curious to what you think. I think the X-Men franchise, I would potentially hit the reboot button once again. Bryan Singer has said he's leaving after X-Men Apocalypse. I would probably recast across the board based on the strength of success of Deadpool and just start this thing all over again and maybe make it a little edgier. Maybe make this be the R, Wolverine's supposed to be R, although they still have that Hugh Jackman movie hanging over their heads. I don't know. I think that, as I said before, when I reviewed Deadpool, I felt that bringing in new talent really showed how fresh it makes the universe seem, and that was one of the best things about the Deadpool movie. And so I'm excited to see Doug Liman enter the X-Men universe and Channing Tatum and other talent. And I think it could be potentially just as exciting, especially if they get all those great visual effects with his cards, the Gambit mutant powers. I think are going to look great on screen when properly realized. So that's my thoughts. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the whole situation. Be sure to write them down below. Comment on the top 3 stories and Queen Sheena's viewer question. Let me know what you'd like to see covered on Monday and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.